Tonight on the Game On podcast. It seems you can teach an old dog new tricks with Brodie Smith's goal. And Port Adelaide are a shadow of its former selves, and the stats, unfortunately, don't lie. And could we be seeing the emergence of an absolute superstar in Oscar Piastri, winning 3 in a row?
And Patrick Dangerfield, that young 35-year-old.
All right, welcome to the Game On podcast. My name's Pete. Once again, Malcolm is back in the studio with me, mate. How's the back feeling?
Yeah, I'll be honest, not great. It certainly gives you time to make plenty of phone calls and do plenty of investigation.
Yep, we're going to talk about that shortly. Phil stepping in for you last week.
Yes, thanks to Phil.
He was fantastic. He said he had big shoes to fill. And
yes, I did have a giggle at that.
He's back again. Mate, what's been your good for the week this week, mate?
I'm going to go good for the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
I'm going to give a bouquet to Glenelg. Went down the bay, probably shouldn't have with my back. I didn't pull up well out of that. But on Anzac Day, and there was nearly 6,000 there. And the bit out of that, talking to Glenelg supporters next to us, that Glenelg have spent money and updone their playground. Mm-hmm. And there were heaps of families.
Yep.
And the family, the mum and dad, were interchanging each quarter with taking the youngsters to the playground back and forth. It was about 10 of them with 3 different families.
If it works, it works.
That, and I'll say, I've seen a lot of these over the years, but I will say the Glenelg Tigers mascot at mixing with the kids and just...
So community engagement.
Yep, great wording.
Yep.
Was brilliant.
Yep.
So a huge tick to Glenelg for that.
Absolutely. Well done to Glenelg there. I happen to be at Glenelg today, and facility down there that, they've built a fortress down there, haven't they? And
they've done a good job.
At the moment, considering, and I walked through the doors, I must admit my initial thought was, gee, this club was in trouble 10, 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah, big trouble.
And now they're a powerhouse, and they deserve all the kudos that they get. So, mate, I'm sort of with you on that as well. I did secure a bit of a ticket to the Adelaide Carlton game. Unfortunately, my Blues were no good, but it was really good to see some good quality football, and we're going to follow up on that in a minute. All right, let's get into Around the Grounds.
Around the Grounds.
All right, mate, and as per usual, a little bit later on, we're going to talk some soccer, some netball, and obviously the SANFL. But because we're recording a touch later tonight than this week, than usual, we have been across the Willie Rioli incident with the AFL. Mate, I know you've been doing a little bit of ringing around and obviously watching a bit of the media that's been going on with it. Mate, I'll ask you your thoughts and we'll go from there.
First off, pathetic yet again by the AFL. Just straight up, the first up message.
Yes.
It's just an automatic suspension. Just had to be.
Yep.
Show some leadership.
Because of the nature of it?
Yep. Nature, it's a threat. It's a serious thing. Show some leadership. Twice now the AFL have had a chance to show leadership over the Bolter saga and now Rioli, and they're certainly batting at none out of 2.
Yep.
And it's been pathetic. Look, I understand too, Port Adelaide worried about Willie Rioli's mental health. Mm-hmm. Yes, I complete sympathy there.
Do you think do we put a lot of pressure on these players these days more than ever because of the amount of coverage? I mean, everyone's got a phone on their camera.
We do.
Camera on their phone.
We've got to be fair. We don't understand and don't live in the Indigenous pair of shoes, so we don't know on some of the stuff Willie and the Aboriginal, the Indigenous community cop. So bit there.
As I was saying off air, my best mate, Aboriginal, I've been around it. I understand it a little bit better than sort of the average punter, but it doesn't excuse what's potentially been happening.
But out of that, as a parent, there are times where you've got to play bad cop and discipline your child or yourself.
Yes.
You remember things in the past. Yep. Yes. Bad cop. Well, I think Port Adelaide had to here. Port Adelaide should have suspended him as well. Exactly as Richmond should have been harder on Bolter. Just using those two examples, the example there.
Do you think, just
Yep.
Question about it. Do you think Richmond knew a little bit more than what the average punter knew before they gave out those 4 games?
Well, to hear that they said they'd seen the complete video. Well, if you'd seen that and only gave 4, I still and don't count the preseason stuff. Don't say he got 6. That's crap.
Yep.
He got 4.
Yep.
So don't say that. And look, to have not read the room and go, right, we're not going to play.
Yep.
So you can front the judge, not having played, full of retribution, full of, thing of disappointment in yourself, what we've done is wrong, rah, rah. But no, to have played beforehand, shoved it up the legal community, and guess what? You don't do that to a judge.
No, absolutely. Now, that leads me to the Willie Rioli part of it, is that there was a little bit of form with Geelong, which has obviously come out, that the clubs tried to handle it internally, which is fine. You know, you made the mention, and I know you're going to go a little bit harder a bit later on about the confidence in the AFL to make a decision, and you mentioned it there, 0 from 2. You know, they tried to sort it out. So there's a little bit of form there. All right, we don't know the context of them, but at the same time, like you said, maybe a little bit of tough love might have been sort of short.
But even remove the on-ground stuff.
Yep.
It's off-field twice in 3 weeks. Twice in 3 weeks or a month. He texted after the Hawthorn game, having a crack at Hawthorn on what they did, and then apologised, realised I did wrong. Yet a month later, you're doing something even worse.
Yep.
Sorry, show some leadership, because the worst thing for him mental health-wise now, I think, is to play. And it's a showdown. And there will be a reasonable number of Crow supporters there. It just invites more. And you and I will be there.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you to SEN.
Yeah, you've won tickets, mate.
Yes.
Well done.
Caller of the week.
Well played.
It's not like I'm not experienced.
No, that's true.
So,
no, but do you think you've made mention that it's not good for his mental health to play, but the club are saying that it is good for his mental health to play.
To be around. I think that's a little bit different.
Okay.
I'm reading that a bit differently. I think
that
to
might
surround him, I think that might have been a bit of a smokescreen. I still don't think he'll play.
Do you think that's part of those AFL negotiations? Because we know that each club with these sorts of things, they negotiate what's going on. Do you think that's
don't
part
the AFL move like a glacier? Like, this has been around for a couple of days. Why is it
going to go into another day?
Another day. It's ridiculous. This should have been done by lunchtime. It's crazy.
Yep.
Just sadly at the moment, I think the AFL, I can't remember a worse leadership. And let's also think they've got a good wicket there. It's not tax deductible. It's run as a non-profitable business. So there's lots of things you can do which the average punter can't do.
Yep.
And I'm going right back to the 70s. There was comments about Ross Oakley, but we still get why Footscray and Fitzroy, the amalgamation. So there's comments there. Demetrio was probably a bit autocratic and was a bit my way or the highway. And it was Jack Hamilton at various times. But honestly, at the moment, it's just horrendous. I've never had no confidence whatsoever in a top shelf administration.
Could you see the clubs, and you brought it up on the way in tonight, could you see the clubs maybe in a vote of no confidence?
I've never ever thought that before at all, but I am going to do a bit of delving this next week on that.
I may mention, and we'll throw it out there to listeners, do you think the players could potentially go on strike because of the umpiring and the inconsistencies, and also suspensions when it comes to little things or high tackles or tackles that are actually deemed irresponsible?
No,
it is part of the game.
It's funny, out of that, while we think, I'm trying to remember, it wasn't Curtis, but there was another one earlier on which we, as a football community, where when the players said, no, we do know our responsibilities on the duty of care. So they probably look at it a little bit different. We're still a bit the fossils. I'm obviously another decade older than you. And still look at that and shake my head. But
we'll preface this, we all get the concussion side of things and how it is a serious part of the game.
And look, I did make some calls this week, and there's one thing, when you're involved with Adelaide Uni Footy Club, it's not like you haven't got access to the lawyers. And
and you haven't got
talking the work experience blokes.
That's right. Yes.
And so we will use the Curtis one as the example. So the person concerned here said it's been about 5 years. I didn't realise it was that long, but it's been nearly 5 years, where by suspending Curtis, Sin really hasn't got the retribution or the recall in the future to go, the AFL didn't regard concussion seriously enough. They go, well, hang on. No, he's suspended for 3 weeks. Yep. The AFL are showing there. So that's where it's a little bit different. There's still lots of things happening behind the scenes legally of cases gone back, which I think most of us are stunned that it's still going. It hasn't, this has been going for a few years. I don't know on when you would have thought there'd be a timeline and all that, but that's where it's a bit confusing on that.
Yeah, there's too much grey area to work through, isn't there?
And I admit I should have thought of that question to ask as well. Yep. I will chase that up again this week as well.
Phil and I obviously talked about it last week. I'm sure you heard it, but we were sort of saying that it doesn't do the young fella from Port any good that the other guy just got 3 weeks if he's got concussion long term. So there's a little bit of toing and froing and
realise.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Mate, do you think Willie will play?
I don't think he will. Yep. I still can't see. AFL can't have carried on today and said, things have now come up we were totally unaware of. Well, you still come back with no sanction. Look, Ken Hinkley got fined $20,000 for making the plane thing. What Taylor Walker copped, 6 games and 20 grand. Mm-hmm.
For potentially something that was taken out of context.
Yeah. Out of the, I'm still totally flummoxed that he hasn't been suspended today.
Yep. How soon do you think that decision will be made? Because at the moment, it doesn't look like it's going to get made before Friday.
No, Chris Davies did say they expect an answer tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting watch, mate. I don't think he can play, and I think, as I mentioned to you over the text during the day, was that putting him in a showdown environment is probably not the ideal situation, considering it's heightened for everybody.
Yeah.
Fans, players alike, umpires. It could get out of hand very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think there'll be a fair bit of booing and all that. And look, it'll actually be interesting to see Port supporters' attitudes. I think there'll be some who are pretty dark, pretty upset with Willie as well, that it won't just be one-way support.
Yep, because he's not able to play.
Yeah.
Or if
even if he is playing.
Yep. It's going to be an interesting watch. All right, mate, let's get excited. I know that this has sort of taken up the first good chunk of the show, but it's Showdown 57, mate, and we should be getting excited for that. Let's talk about that before we start talking about last week's matches. Mate, what do we expect from Showdown 57?
Look, I think, too, at the moment, with Port Adelaide, it's if they're competitive enough and all of a sudden get first handball. Sweet's been spanked, absolutely annihilated 2 weeks in a row. Now, he ended last year's showdown in good form, and he beat O'Brien in the showdown where Port won. Mm-hmm. So, who knows what way Port will go there. I think they'll probably stick with him, but they may go Soldo or Vicente. But out of that, if Sweet beats O'Brien and Ruck, and all of a sudden Butters and Horn Francis get first share of the ball, Port Adelaide are in the game.
They're competitive.
But if O'Brien gets on top and Dawson and Rankin get on top, Adelaide have more forward line power, especially if Rioli doesn't play.
Yes.
They're relying a lot on Georgiadis and Horn Francis to kick their goals. Compared to the Adelaide forward line, which has got a fair few more avenues.
Mate, I have to ask, do you think that the movement to put the captain back to halfback flank, Rosie, is this causing some of these sort of fluctuations? Because they've lost by 90 points twice now in a season.
Yeah, but
that's un-Port Adelaide like.
That was game one where he was on ball.
Yeah.
His form at halfback's been very good. Better at halfback than what he was on ball.
Do you think it's upset the balance a bit?
No, I thought it actually helped them balance.
So did I.
So, out of that, I just think one Sweet, as we said, but Western Bulldogs midfield probably bats deeper than any other midfield.
Yep.
At the moment, you've got the top 25 players. Well, Ed Richards isn't in one of those yet. He's ranked by the rankings as the number one midfielder. So I laughed at that.
Pretty scary.
So Richards, Bontempelli, and the guy who's exploded is Fry, however you pronounce. I think it's Freer, however you pronounce.
Yep.
His correct pronunciation.
Yes.
Sanders, they're just batting really deep.
Yep.
And got Treloar back, and it was like he hadn't missed a beat as well.
No, and he's like a fine wine, getting better with age as well.
So I just think their midfield probably bats deeper than any other midfield. Yep. So I think that overwhelmed Port. And again, Port like Freo, you've got to question them mentally, especially when they're away.
Yep. Well,
and just not to fight the game out.
Yep. We're going to talk about that a little bit
percentage
later.
Will decide spots.
Yes.
And now Port's percentage received another whack and is at 87.
Yep.
Well, good luck trying to get it back up, to 110, 120, which you need.
That's right.
From
105
from
maybe,
8.
110, yes. 120, you definitely, They're going to have to take some big scalps along the way. Adelaide, the forgotten man here is probably Jordan Dawson. Could he light it up again, or will he get a bit of close checking in the showdown?
I think they'll try and close check him, but the thing about Jordan Dawson is he's so good overhead.
Mm-hmm.
So he's actually pretty hard to put a hard tag on. He actually played last week a bit more forward than he's done.
He even spent a bit of time down back as well.
Yeah,
so is that to shake
anywhere.
A tag maybe?
I
or
think so.
Shake a bit of close checking?
little bit.
Yep.
And they used Rochelle, probably had more midfield time last
Which
week
was a surprise,
than he had previously. So that they sort of shook things up without Crouch and all of a sudden had more pace there and that probably overwhelmed Carlton a bit. I thought.
We'll get to that one in a minute, mate. Who's your tip for Showdown 57, mate?
Look, I'll go Adelaide, but it's
a showdown, isn't it?
It is a showdown. It is 28 all, out of that. Look, Adelaide should win.
Yep.
And you'd be bloody disappointed if they don't, but it is a showdown. And if Horn Francis and Butters explode, Port are right in the game.
Yep. How many times are we going to say it? And we'll say it again. It doesn't matter where these two teams are on the ladder and who's flying and who's not. Come showdown, anything can happen.
Well, you also had the bit, really, I think we thought Port were gone before the game against Hawthorn.
Yes.
And they exploded. They played some scintillating footy. Now, if they play as well as that.
It's game on.
Yeah, more than game on.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's get into last week's games. Let's talk Adelaide first. Wow, they put Carlton to the canvas pretty quickly and did it by moving the ball fast, which you mentioned a little bit earlier on. But just their efficiency and I was sitting relatively close to the ground as far as level goes. I could see the way that they were moving the ball, and such precision by foot was just amazing to watch. And then when they got it running,
and quick gives,
they were unstoppable.
Michael Annie, Worrell played his best game. Michael Annie's a gun. He's the best. I think he's the best shutdown defender in the comp. But all of a sudden, they've told him, we want you to actually take a few more risks.
Yep.
Get the ball in his hands because he's a beautiful kick.
And him and Malira are the same. They do take that little bit of a risk and open up play a little bit. I've got some interesting stats here for Maxi, mate. I put it on my sort of separate run sheet tonight. 27 disposals, 12 marks, 8 score involvements, and that's the one you're talking about there. But 515 metres gained, and almost had a chance to kick a goal. And I went to the game really watching him for a half of football, and he just positions himself so well.
He's very footy smart.
Yep.
So was his dad.
Yeah, well,
his dad, Piano was very footy smart.
Good footy lineage, that's for sure. Huge skipper's performance, but does he get recognised as much as he should? I mean, he's leading now the AFL players' coaches' votes, but does he get recognised, or don't recognise him and just let him keep running around like an unregistered dog?
I think that's probably a bit because you're stuck away. In South Australia, like Pavlich never got recognised as much as he should have in WA.
Yep.
Dangerfield didn't get registered as much
until he went to Geelong.
Dangerfield was always in the best player. He's been in the best handful of players for 15 years now.
Yep.
12 to 15 years.
Yep.
He was a superstar here.
Absolutely.
And people out of that, some people are like, he only arrived at Geelong.
It's amazing, isn't it? All right, Brodie Smith's goal, how everyone got around him. These are the team-building moments that can't be underestimated, and that's the sign of a connected group, isn't it?
Yeah, and he has got a copy of my book, so I was happy with that. Yeah, look, he is, but he is very popular. His mum actually bought it for him as a birthday present.
Hey.
So she got good
taste.
Good taste, yeah.
Yep.
Out of that, and he is popular. He is a good bloke. He's sort of the bit of the life and that of the party, you know, that guy.
Yep.
But he's not overboard loud one. He's the one back, probably a bit more dry sense of humour, that sort of thing.
One back, one to the side.
Yeah. So he's popular. Look, it's going to be interesting to see what they do this week with Hinge back available.
Mm-hmm.
I think Smith will still miss out now,
Yep.
but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
That'll get down to selection, but we'll talk about that one there. Sid Draper, what's your thoughts on him being or not being selected in the league side or in the AFL side?
Oh, look, we still got to remember it is his first year. He's still only, a kid, and out of that, he will bulk up a little bit as well, which
Absolutely.
I think they want there. He'll still be an absolute gun. Would I be playing him? Yes.
Yep.
But
That's why I asked, mate.
yeah, but I can see why not.
Is
as
it
well.
more for the balance of things at the
I
moment?
think it is a
and not
little
to
bit.
burn the young fella out?
Yeah, a little bit. And let's also remember, I think, I'm trying to think how many league games he played for South. Probably 5 or 6, around there.
Yep.
So he still hasn't played that much footy. Yes, he dominated junior footy. And
Of course.
God, wow.
Yep.
And I actually did show. I think I worked it out. I watched him 18 times before he got drafted.
Yep.
So it wasn't like I was.
No,
commenting
you
on
only
once
watched
or
it 4 or
twice,
5 games. Yeah.
Out of that, rate him enormously. I still think he'll be an absolute gun in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll still be a very good player before the end of the year. Let's also remember, come September, that sweet smelling dry grass. And okay, we've got dry
At the moment,
at
yes.
the moment,
Yep.
very dry. Yeah, but we'll still get that at the end. And that's when the bodies have gone through that mud and that for a while. It's quite often the youngsters come through and burst. So I'm still very much on his camp.
No, fair call, and I like it as well, and I'd be the same. I'd play him as well, but I understand for team balance and not burning the young fella out. Mate, question without notice, with him playing sub there for a couple of weeks, is it a case of let's just get some footy into him? And
Oh, yeah,
and,
it is.
And is the sub rule such a bad rule to have because a lot of clubs do exploit it in the way that they do leave these young fellas basically on the bench for 3 quarters doing nothing?
I'd much rather have just 5 changes.
Thank you
there.
very much. That's where I'm leading with the question without notice, mate. I'm in
Yeah.
the same boat. Let's get rid of the sub altogether. Just have the 4 or 5 on the bench, and that is it. And it's a game of attrition. It's played over a long period of time. The strongest will survive. All right, let's move on to Port Adelaide. One of the worst losses I've seen, and we've seen a lot of them already this year, mate.
Well, it's 2 big losses in 2 away games. And as we said, both Port and Fremantle in particular have been terrible away.
Yep.
And you've then, although Port did beat Sydney, but it was almost a keystone. It was almost who managed to make the least amount of errors that game, not one team deserving to win. I think it's more disappointing once they get, say, 5 or 6 down and the game's just about gone that they fall away dramatically.
Yep.
And then rebound the next week.
Yes.
Although, let's also remember this year that was against Richmond. So,
yeah, you've got
not quite as much.
No, but Collingwood are a quality side. And look, the Bulldogs seem to be up and about at the moment. They did play Mars Stadium down there in Ballarat pretty well with the wind and no grandstands basically around it with everything being built. That was a bizarre game to schedule at that venue considering they could have played at Marvel.
And again, where's the AFL there to say, no, we're not going to – Ballarat, you can work out your sponsorship deal between you.
Yep.
Include years in the future, whatever. You can work
you
that
can
out.
play 2 games there in the future, to make it up. Yep.
And we'll subsidise now. We'll show some leadership. AFL. Play it there. Like, there's been a kick because I think there were a lot of Port supporters who couldn't get tickets.
Yes.
And so the Crows are in the same boat. So there's been a kick up with that. But no, that game's staying at Ballarat as well. So yet again, just piss week.
Marvel wasn't being used.
And apparently Marvel's available that weekend.
That's just
staggering.
Absolutely crazy considering
Bizarre.
it's the home venue of the AFL, really. I mean, we know that Melbourne, the MCG is the MCG. I wasn't going to say the home of football, mate, because we all know where that is. But, if it's not being used and you've got a perfectly good ground where you can get 25,000 in where you can only get 5,000 into a stadium that's being redeveloped, I don't get it. I
And
really don't.
Mark Bickley's point yesterday is a very good point where if I'm a resident of Ballarat, because Ballarat Council, Ballarat Shire pay a lot of that money. Well, I'd be cracking the shits because you're not getting the benefit, because you're not getting the tourists in to spend the money in the district.
Yep.
So it's not like
you're only getting 5,000 instead of 10, 15,000.
And you're not getting, but out of that 5,000, a lot of them are locals.
That's right.
So you're not getting the tourists. So all of a sudden you're not getting that income, projection into your community.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's just dumb.
It is. Mate, the midfield is not accountable at the moment, and the stats aren't lying, and this is where it's breaking down, isn't it, for Port Adelaide?
There's a bit too much running one way. Very good if they're fine if they're winning in the midfield, but you've got to question a little bit how much they're running the other way and how much they're working in that way.
Like I said, mate, the stats unfortunately do not lie. Josh Carr has got a lot of work to do. Do they rebuild or do they try to do it on the run? Because, look, Port Adelaide are the only team that haven't finished bottom. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of South Australians will know that fact, but if there's anybody listening from overseas or interstate, is that Port Adelaide haven't bottomed out. They haven't had to cut hard and rebuild. Do they go down that track?
You're certainly starting to wonder, out of that. Radicalier and, in defence.
Zirk Thatcher.
Yeah, he's been injured, but again...
He's not an A-grader.
No, I don't think, and Alier, yes, is an interceptor, but he's not great defensively.
Yep.
So I don't think that defence can win a premiership.
Yep.
So, I think there's some big decisions ahead.
Now, the question we noticed there, or probably noticed because you will know this, is Zach Butters. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but now it's sort of intensified a little bit with him saying, I'm not going anywhere until the end of 26. Is he sitting on the fence and waiting to see what Josh Carr does? Or does the club just say, look...
Port have thrown the kitchen sink at him today.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, so they've offered him a 2-year deal to 28, and they've also offered him effectively an 8-year deal right through to 2034. Right. So they've thrown the kitchen sink at him today.
Sorry, mate, I wasn't across that one today. I've been flat out busy.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that happened today on the Rioli Day as well. So,
sort of gets lost in the wash a little bit, doesn't it? It's an interesting one. But Port have got to do everything they can to keep him, don't they? They've really got to build that side around him and Horn Francis.
Yeah, I think that's the only option. Because if they do lose one of them, if they lost...
It is almost start again, isn't it?
Yeah, just about.
You got to almost rebuild on the run. Mate, the Prison Bars are back this weekend, but should it be motivation or has it become a little bit of a gimmick? And I know there's a lot of people turning over in their Port Adelaide people turning over in their graves, but it does feel a bit that way. It's still that whole us versus them. Look, we all know. Let them wear it for the showdown. Yeah. Doesn't matter.
Nah,
it's only Collingwood.
It's a bit overrated
enough, isn't it?
Yep.
So it has become a bit of a gimmick, but does it serve as motivation for them this weekend, or does the showdown and the Crows just provide enough motivation in itself?
Yeah, I think it does, and they'll try that anyway.
All right, mate, let's get into some of the other hot topics. Before we do, Essendon just narrowly beating North Melbourne. That was not a game for the ages, mate, but it seems that long ago you've almost forgotten about it with everything going on. The big one here is St Kilda getting over Freo by 61 points. It was definitely a shocker-docker or a docker-shocker.
And again, it showed if you cut Sarong especially, and to a slightly lesser extent Brayshaw out of the game, they fall right away.
Yep.
And that's where I'm critical of the Adelaide coaching game plan, where the week before it just looked, no, we'll stick to our structures, we'll do our game, blah, blah, blah. Yep. Instead of...
They didn't read the room. Yeah. They really didn't read the room.
Yeah, but you've had the blueprint sent by Melbourne the week before, and purely the stats show that.
Yep.
If you cut Sarong out, it's now at 78% after that game. You cut him down, they fall away, and Adelaide didn't attempt that. Was piss weak by the Adelaide coaching.
Was it a Ross Lyon masterclass?
To some extent, yeah.
Yep.
But again, they didn't really play it hard, but they just play. When the ball was in dispute, they were manning up. Yep. They would just played it smarter.
Yep.
Didn't quite play the Russian roulette job.
Yes. Ross, a bit of a rocket to a few players, and they responded, especially Garcia.
So, yeah.
Is that one thing that Ross is probably known for, is that he is a little bit harsh on players, but he does give them the opportunity to respond?
And he gives plenty of feedback, apparently. Like, you do get a lot of the players who just speak glowingly of him, the past players who played under him, who said you always knew where you stood as well.
Yep.
There was no bullshit with him. And,
it's important,
you
isn't
know,
it?
so...
It's what you want to know as an AFL player, whether you're in, you're out, and what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, so you can correct if you need. So,
tell you what, one other point, with having a crook back, so being stuck at home, you actually soon notice the free-to-air bit previously didn't worry me. If there was a game I wanted to watch, I'd just go to the pub.
Yes.
And sell books.
Yep.
And that, so I watch a lot of footy at the Arkabar because it's a great atmosphere.
Yep.
So stuck at home last Saturday with no free to wear, and it was the Collingwood Geelong, and I think also you really noticed it because the game's on. There's too many teams now.
Yes.
We're about to go to another team, and there's not the quality.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. True.
Yep.
But there's not the quality, and you're watching. There's been some shit football games.
Well, I mean, look, last Thursday and Friday night, it wasn't exactly setting the world on fire, was it? Certainly, St Kilda got the job done there. The Bulldogs over Port Adelaide, which we talked about. Adelaide over Carlton. This one was an absolute cracker, mate. This probably should have been Friday night billing, but it ended up being Saturday night billing, which was Collingwood just going down to the Cats.
Geez, it fluctuated back and forth. One team, and Collingwood should have been further in front. They missed side bottom, missed one from 20 metres out, and all that. But then the champ, Patrick Dangerfield.
He's like a fine wine, isn't he? He's just getting better.
His
and
last
better
quarter
and better.
was one for the ages, and as I said, he's always been a superstar. And just yes, your question is kicking at goal. Yep,
that's probably his Achilles heel.
Yeah, it is
not a bad one.
Yeah, I always laugh at the comment about his kicking in a field position, mainly because so much of his ball he always got was in the heat of the situation. So yeah. He's a gun. Yep. Absolute superstar.
Question we don't know is, could he win another Brownlow?
Oh, yeah, Brownlow, but I think he's a big chance to become the first 9-time All-Australian.
I think there's a pretty good chance of it right here, right now. Sydney getting back on the winners list with a good win over the Giants, which was a little surprising.
Yeah, and hats off to Cox there that he played Francis and Hambling as defensive forwards on Sam Taylor. So all of a sudden, Sam Taylor wasn't taking the interceptor marking, and Francis checked Buckley and cut him out. So it was, I think that'll be a tactic which other sides might try and do a bit more against
the Giants.
Yep. So now the Giants have lost 3 in a row. They're 4-4. So a few questions being answered there. So yeah.
All right, we got a couple of hot questions a little bit later on about some of these games or some of the games that we've played already. Hawthorn getting up over Richmond, no real surprises there, but the big one was the 7 o'clock game, Brisbane v the Gold Coast Suns. Probably expected a little bit more out of the Suns, but the Lions just flexing their muscle.
And apart from Willie Rioli, Bailey Humphrey is the other one who wins my Idiot of the Week award. It shits me, players not knowing the rules.
Yep.
When he picked up the grass and threw it. They're going to go into quarter time. Brisbane haven't kicked a goal. Yes, you've only kicked the one, but you've still at least held them goalless, and it's moment. They get a gimme goal through a player's fucking stupidity.
Yes.
Unforgivable stupidity.
No, fair enough.
Bang. And then their next goal, okay, yes, we realise that the AFL have cracked right down on the intentional, in terms of insufficient attempt.
Yes.
But Jeffrey, the ball was going to go out, and he grabbed it and came back inboard to get caught. So Cameron kicks the goal. So all of a sudden, Country Road's up and about.
Yep.
Bang.
There he goes, So, hadn't kicked a goal for 3 weeks, Charlie Cameron.
And it was 0 goals 8 in the last 3 weeks, and you give him that goal.
And away he went.
So, yes, in the end, while the margin flattered them in the end, they effectively lost more by 3. But they got Brisbane started through their own moronship.
Yep. No, fair call. Holding the ball or trip in that Collingwood game, mate. What was the correct call? Because I know you'd have been analysing this as an umpire.
as an umpire, my first thought was a trip. Now, I've watched it again and again. I've got complete sympathy for the umpire playing the trip in that, because it does look... Is an argument for holding the ball, but I had no problem with the trip being paid.
Do you think, because we have the benefit of slow motion a little bit here, do you think he tackled him to cause the non-disposal before he tripped him? Because that's really what it gets down to, doesn't it?
You can argue where the tackle started and then slipped down, but it's so quick.
Yep.
My first thought watching it was, I would have paid a trip.
Okay. Fair enough. It's one of those ones that anything can happen there.
Yeah, you're not really right or wrong on that in the end. Just my first impression. Asked a couple of umpiring mates.
Yes.
And they were
First
split
reaction.
on
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. The AFL drug policy under review, but players don't want it changed. Is this dicing with danger?
And now the other word is it's actually going to be watered down.
Yeah, well, that's why I've added it to the list, mate. All right, Harley Reid, mate, where is he going, and where is he going to be playing his best football medium to long term?
I don't think it will be at West Coast. I'll be surprised if he doesn't go back to Victoria.
Do you think a young player needs to be around good structure like that to give his best football? I mean, you talked about Dangerfield being at Adelaide as a young man. Pretty good environment at Adelaide at that time. Neil Craig was obviously there, set them up for obviously success and was just short a couple of times. Yeah. But being in that strong environment rather than a total rebuild environment changes that player's probably standing in the game, doesn't it?
Well, there's nothing else there in the midfield to help him. So, their list is putrid and Yayo injured.
Yep.
Jeez, there's nothing. And so I feel sorry for him at the moment.
Yep.
Do I think he's working hard enough? Is he disciplined enough?
But he's got no role models.
He's a second-year Blues a little bit. But, I just think, and you understood completely, I had no problems at all with Jason Horne-Francis wanting to come back.
Yep.
We all change jobs. We all people like to be home in their home environment.
Yep.
So I've got no problem if he wants to come back.
I think Essendon will be a mistake for me if he goes to Essendon. I think he's on much of the same as West Coast. Probably not as bad, but I think he needs to get into a strong environment.
Yeah, I think Scott can build that. And that I wouldn't see that as big a drama as staying at West Coast. Put it that way.
But could the unthinkable happen? He end up at North Melbourne. Could that actually happen?
No,
I wouldn't think so either. But anyway, I'm just throwing things up there, mate. Let's get some quick tips before we move on and take a very, very quick break because we're really flying along here, mate. Fremantle v Collingwood.
Purely because of who Collingwood have rested and the fact that it is Fremantle in Perth and how much better they play there.
Yep.
And the stats are obscenely different
Yep.
in terms of everything, all the key indicators. I'll go Freo.
Yep. Freo for me. I think there'll be a response after last week, mate. Question without notice, and I should have mentioned it before we did our tips here. Home ground advantage, is it real or is it a myth? Because it seems to be a little bit, or it feels like it's that way at the moment. Teams are struggling a little bit on the road.
Yeah, I think it is an advantage. It is an advantage, but I'll still always remember the two things Malcolm Blight did.
Yep.
Did a lesson in how to tie your boots up.
Yep.
With your shoelaces, and then he picked up grass from the ground, threw it in the air and said, this grows on ovals at home and away, and there's goalposts at each end. Yep. And I still reckon that nails it.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree too, but it seems this year probably a little bit more than the last few years.
I think
the home ground advantage.
The crowd gets involved and that helps.
Trust me, the noise of affirmation last week against Carlton was huge, and it did play a part at stages. There were some weird decisions, but we're not going to go into umpiring tonight, mate. Let's go St Kilda v Carlton, Friday at the MCG.
Toss a coin, Carlton.
Do you expect a response from Carlton?
Yeah, I do, and I still think they're probably a bit better. Whether I'm underestimating St Kilda a little bit.
Yep.
Hopefully, Matthias Filippo comes back in.
It'll be good to see him play.
Yeah.
Look, I hope Carlton too, but I think it's going to be a close match. Don't think it's going to be one that sets the world on fire, but I think it's just going to be a close, tight, hard clash. Melbourne v Hawthorn.
Oh, you got to go for Hawthorn. But if Gawn just continues to go absolutely and dominate, but Meek's a good player, so
Yes.
I can't see him, smacking and just dominating because West Coast rucks are about as good as you or me, mate. So
geez,
yeah.
send me a contract and I'll sign up today. Hawthorn for me. Essendon v Sydney at Marvel.
Yeah, I think Eston's injuries are going to catch up sooner or later. I'll go Sydney.
Sydney for me, and again, tight game. This one's probably, apart from the next one that we'll talk about briefly in a minute, is Gold Coast v the Western Bulldogs. Probably one of the
I've
games
been hard
of
on
the
this
round.
one a fair bit. Look, they are so good in Darwin. We know that the ball becomes a cake of soap, so it's a different game completely.
And Gold Coast sort of see that on a regular basis.
Western Bulldogs have been impressive. And look, they were even impressive here. The game here at the home of football against Brisbane was a great game.
Yep. I've got to go Suns on the home ground advantage.
Yeah, okay.
And I think their winning percentage up there is something like
it's
76
huge.
or 78%. Yeah. So for me, it's the Suns.
Yep.
We've already talked Showdown, Port v Crows. You're picking the Crows. I'm picking the Crows, but anything can happen in Showdowns.
Yep.
Richmond v West Coast.
It's in Melbourne, Richmond.
Richmond for me. Geelong v the Giants at GMHBA, which is obviously Canadian Park.
Ironically, the Giants have won there the last 4 years, but I will go the Cats.
Cats for me as well. And North Melbourne v Brisbane.
Brisbane.
Mate, just one last one. We didn't talk about it during the Adelaide Carlton game, but, mate, Riley O'Brien is playing all right at the moment, but I did notice on the weekend...
He's been terrible. He was terrible against Freo.
I agree.
So,
But I did notice on the weekend he changed his angles to stop De Koning jumping all over him. And obviously Sammy Balderstone's down there, and that was probably part of the tactic, and it worked.
would hope so.
And it worked.
He did a good job on it.
And it worked. So I did want to throw that in there.
No, that's true.
I'm still not sold on it, but I'm saying on the weekend, being there live and actually watching the way he crafted.
He did well.
He did very, very well. All right, mate, let's take a very quick break. Coming up, we've got Adelaide United. They squeeze into the finals against Western United. Can they go all the way? And the SANFL, good old classic SANFL football at Unley and a few sausage rolls at Lincoln. And in the netball, the Adelaide Thunderbirds, 1 point narrow loss.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
Looking to buy or sell your home anywhere in Adelaide, from the hills to the sea? Meet Gary KRIEVS, your dedicated local agent from OUWENS CASSERLY Real Estate. With unparalleled knowledge of Adelaide's housing market and a commitment to exceptional service, Gary ensures a smooth and stress-free experience for all your real estate needs. Trust the expert, trust Gary KRIEVS at OUWENS CASSERLY Real Estate. Your next dream home awaits. Contact Gary today on 0422 071 317 or on email garyk@ocre.com.au. And for more listings, please visit owenscasserly.com.au. Make it happen. All right, we thank our sponsors as per usual.
Yep.
Gary KRIEVS has been with us now for a little while and really thank him for his support. All right, mate, let's move on to Adelaide United. Make the finals just with a few results going their way, but can they go all the way?
Oh, look, you still wouldn't think so, but it'd be hilarious if they did have a good run now after with the coach on the way out.
Unfortunately, Archie Goodwin, the golden boot here, will be out with a hamstring injury, and that is going to be a big, big problem. All right, how do you think they'll go against Western United?
Yeah, obviously I hope I'm wrong, but I'll go Western United.
I did read something, and I just tried to look it up now, and I haven't quite got it here on my phone, but I think the Western United are in a little bit of trouble with FIFA with something along the lines in that they can't recruit or sign so many players for the next 3 years or something like that. So do a little bit of delving with that as well. So it should be interesting.
And one other thing, since we're talking about the World Game, got to talk about the Champions League this morning.
Yes.
Inter Milan beating Barcelona 4-3.
Yep.
After the other semi had been 3-3.
Yep.
Barcelona in front, and a player should have run the ball down to the flag, held the game up, but he had a crack, hit the post, mind you.
Yep.
Goes in, he's a hero.
Yes.
Hits the post, but they go down the other end and score the
Yep.
equaliser. So he didn't play the percentages, but, geez, it was an incredible game.
That's what you want to be seeing. Ange Postecoglou, well, we'll stay on the round game or the oval ball game. The soccer ball game. Ange Postecoglou, do you think he'll remain at Tottenham?
Only if they win the Europa Cup.
Really?
Yep. I reckon they have to win it.
Conditional.
I reckon. So they're in front. They've got the other next leg.
Yep.
It's in the next couple of days, actually.
Yep.
So
we'll report back on it next week for sure.
Yeah.
It
could well be a Man United Tottenham final in the Europa Cup.
That'd be huge. That would be absolutely
Arsenal are coming. Look, I can't see Arsenal beating PSG away. They've already lost against PSG at home.
Yep.
So expecting it to be effectively French versus Italian final.
There you go. Sticking with the world game, the Lady Reds versus Melbourne Victory in the second leg of their final, Saturday the 10th of May, 1:45 p.m. It's a bit of a festival of sport here in South Australia on the 10th with the netball, the soccer and the football all being played basically within a couple of hours of each other, which is fantastic. All right, let's move on to SANFL. Good old classic SANFL football at Unley Oval between Sturt and Glenelg. And that means that Sturt now remain undefeated.
Yeah, and Glenelg now lost 2 games, which, I think they're still the side to beat.
Yep.
But Sturt, pretty even side. And, look, I think Sturt and, Glenelg the 2. And Woodville West Torrens are going reasonably and all that. So, look, it's reasonable in that. Obviously, as a Norwood, Norwood supporter, where Norwood are struggling, and I don't think Norwood will play finals.
Yep. I think it's a little bit reminds me of 23.
You're losing board and just the amount of injuries they've got, and look, you throw the dartboard and recruit so many, and probably a couple of them have struggled.
Yep. And they'll find their feet as the season goes on anyway.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some other results here. Woodville West Torrens getting up over Port Adelaide.
Yep, as expected. And
just
all
Port's depth, isn't it?
Yeah, but Port's huffing and puffing it for the start of the year. I don't think there's too many people upset that they're still struggling.
Fair enough. Central Districts, who we have talked about a little bit here, getting up over the Panthers.
Yep.
Out at the Ponderosa.
Yeah, it was close early, and then Centrals ran all over them. Look, probably the biggest surprise was West Adelaide beating North Adelaide.
I've got it down here, mate.
Yeah, North have now lost each game at home. So, they would have been pretty disappointed with that at the Wembley of the North, as Chock-a-Block, the great man, called it.
Absolutely, and Jacob Surgeon got a little bit of work to do there, but I think his partner's involved at West Adelaide as some sort of administrative role, so the dinner table might have been interesting that night for a little while anyway, and then it would have been kiss and make up and get on with things as well. All right, let's talk about this week's tips. What do you think, mate? Bloods v Western Bulldogs. Western Bulldogs. Central Districts.
Yeah, I'll go Centrals.
Centrals for me. Port v the Crows.
I'll go Adelaide.
And that's Curtin Razor at Adelaide Oval, which is good to see. The Panthers v the Redlegs at Strutter
down there.
at McGain Stadium.
Yes, be it Panther
Panther
down
Park.
at Noarlunga. We've also got the news through that John Griffin's funeral is at Noarlunga. Griff was obviously a great South man as well.
Absolutely.
On Sunday the 18th from 2:30 at down at Noarlunga. So I'll be there for that. And geez, knowing the number of mates Griff's had, it could be a record attendance at Noarlunga there and that side of things, because he's hugely respected within the footy and also at teaching world and that. So look. Cancer's a bastard of a thing, and
good luck to all involved there, and condolences to the family. All right, let's move on. Glenelg v Woodville West Torrens.
Yeah, down at the Bay, so I will go Glenelg.
Yep, Glenelg for me, and North Adelaide v Sturt at Prospect, or the Wembley of the North.
Yeah, I'll go Sturt. You have to at the moment.
You do, don't you? They are in red hot form, and we've talked about it before. Marty Matner is up and about and got them firing. Just before we move off the SANFL W ladies getting the job done over the WAFL ladies as well.
Yeah, it's a good result.
Was a reasonably good result. I think that was a curtain raiser before the Crows and Carlton game as well. So could sort of see something happening as we were walking in, but obviously they'd only just finished and bits and pieces.
The gap's got to be so big.
Yeah, I wonder if they'd been playing a curtain raiser. So, yeah, interesting there. All right, let's move on to the netball. The Thunderbirds, narrow 1-point loss. They'll be itching to set the record straight this weekend against the Firebirds.
Yeah, big game now. So, yeah, go the Thunderbirds.
I think that one's at home Saturday the 10th at Saturday the 10th at 4:30. So you've got the soccer at over in the Lady Reds over in Melbourne. You've got the Firebirds. So there's plenty to watch, plenty to do. That's for sure.
Yep.
All right, mate. We better take another quick break. Coming up, we've got Greg Edwards, part 2, as we said last week. Did a little bit of a audit. We found we missed a couple along the way. And Phil Harper, part 2.
You're listening to the Game On podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
Sport. We love it and we live it here at INTERSPORT. We are the heart of sport in our local communities. Family owned and operated, supporting local clubs and the community. INTERSPORT has all the latest products for major brands like Nike, ASICS and New Balance at the best prices. Come visit us in store and see why we're your trusted sports experts. INTERSPORT, the heart of sport.
Flashbacks.
I want to give him some leg power in the midfield. Got to give him a go sooner or later.
Johnson wrapped up in the tackle. So we've got about 14 and a quarter minutes remaining here, and 3 straight kicks the difference. The first 3 showdowns were all close. The last one last year was a real blowout, the Crows winning by 74, but the first 3 were 11, 7 and 9 points. This could nearly get down to that. Gallagher goes off the ground. He's been very good, particularly after half-time.
You'd like to see Gavin Wanganeen maybe go forward, but as I look inside 50 there, it's Andrew McLeod. You've got to leave Wanganeen in there, but if it wasn't for McLeod going inside 50 and playing on the ball, that could be an option there for Mark Williams.
Yes, but I think Gavin Wanganeen is the one player who could really cut the game apart.
Wilson up to centre wing. He put that in front and said, go on, sprint after that. And Donald Dickey did. Franco there as well, and a ball up centre wing.
Well, Ben Hardy was under all sorts of pressure there. We had Gavin Wanganeen back in defence, but Donald Dickey leading in the race with Ben Hart just able to stay with him, nudge him out of it, and good enough to tie up Josh Franco when the ball came back.
Commitment for both sides. Commitment's been fantastic today, particularly in close, in tight. They've been absolutely great. It looks like Burton warming up now.
Franco. He's had a great day, Josh, but this one floats out of bounds on the full. Franco's had 25.
Yeah.
Actually, he was nearly to that at half-time. I reckon he was 18 and 19 at half-time.
I agree with you, Drew.
And Troy Bond coming off, so Brett Burton will go to the forward pocket. This is going to be an interesting contest because it suggests Shane Bond a little bit short and Stephen Daniels. Perhaps the immediate match-up for Brett Burton standing to the interchange bench.
Crows free kick here to Pittman. He takes it quickly.
Extra time. Big finish.
All right, man, being that it's Showdown week, we thought we better play a little bit of Showdown there. Normally we do the last couple of minutes, but it was one of those games where It was probably more about the players playing. Pittman, Franku, Jared Polton, Treadray. Look, the list goes on. Bickley, Hart. Mate, what are your first memories of Showdown? Did you go to Showdown 1?
Yes. I think we're ready to call the world off after Showdown 1. And then Blighty just walked in the next night, wrote 18 on the board. It was a masterstroke.
It was, wasn't it? Obviously, the Crows going on to win the premiership that year and then the following year as well. So they were up and about. Are we expecting the same close contest or could it blow out? I know we've already sort of covered it a bit, but we haven't sort of thought about it from that point of view.
I think if Port dominate the midfield, I think it'll be close.
Yep.
If Adelaide win the midfield, I think it will be a blowout.
All over Red Rover. All right, mate, let's move on very, very quickly here. We did talk about the SANFL W there with the women's getting a win over the Waffle, but their season sort of not quite fitting in with some of the local clubs around here. Does it make it hard for clubs to keep that continuity?
Yep. Yes, and yes.
Done. There you go. Thought I'd throw that one in because I know a couple of young ladies who are playing for a couple of local clubs, and one week they've got all these SANFL girls back, and the next week they haven't. Yeah, it makes it hard, doesn't it? And we're trying to encourage, obviously, them playing as much as possible. The WNBL, the Lightning, might be removed from the national competition. Have we heard any movement on that at the moment? Because it is a bit of a worry.
It is a worry, yeah. So you just got to keep remembering all these national competitions. Australia is such a bloody huge country.
Yes.
You're not just hop in your car and drive for an hour. It's all the flights, the accommodation.
Yep.
It's huge, and it's not a surprise of competitions falling away.
Let's talk baseball. They're in the same boat. Potential collapse of the ABL, the Australian Baseball League, because of the Melbourne Aces leaving. Yeah. The Adelaide Giants are left in limbo at the moment as to what the competition is going to look like, or does it become Asian, Australia, New Zealand type competition where we do get a bit more travel?
I think it'll depend on investment and what they can attract. Yeah, whether the American sides will come in and be the major stakeholders for that side.
I always thought that they were. But,
that's what I thought.
But that they were subsidising, or not subsidising as such, but they were contributing.
Pretty heavily involved. Yeah,
correct. And we do see a lot of their players come down, especially to Adelaide, being a little more local. I just thought that the MLB, a bit like the AFL, they've got that investment there to be made. You would think that they would want to foster that as best they can.
It's a bit, it's hard to work out. I'd like to know more. Try and think who baseball.
No, you're right. Might do a little bit of research as well.
Yeah,
I heard on the grapevine that Melbourne are coming out of the ABL competition to join some Asian competition. So I don't know if that's true, whether that was just a rumour or what it is. So I might do a little bit of research myself there, mate. Mate, you weren't here last week, but we're going to mention it again. The 14-year-old making IPL history. Will he be the next big thing in all forms of cricket moving forward, mate? What are your thoughts as a cricket nut?
I've watched highlights of him batting, and geez, he is pretty impressive.
Technically?
Yeah, he did get out first. He did get out first ball the next game.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, but that in IPL, but geez, 14, bloody hell.
What were you doing at 14, mate?
Not making millions of dollars, that's for sure.
No, I wasn't hitting sixes over the boundary and scoring hundreds at will. So it's going to be very interesting. Do they temper him a little bit just for the IPL, or do they let him loose and just say, grind it out for the next 15, 20 years?
Who knows?
30 years almost.
It was interesting. I'm trying to think. Crash Craddock it was, where he said, you got to remember, so many of these people in India, they turn up because it's all ambition to play for India and all that.
Yep.
And then there's a success story. Like there's one success story in
the diamond in the rough, or the $1 million, what is it? The $1 million slumdog, basically.
So it's incredible. I wish it was at the Sheffield Shield level, or trying to think what the Indian level is called.
Yep.
But I just always worries me. Will they just decide to stick to that? See the dollar signs and see Mitch Owens now been signed up as Glenn Maxwell's injury replacement.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, $550,000 contract for a few weeks. Yeah, it's
jeez. Does he need anyone to carry his bags? Cause,
yeah, exactly.
I'd certainly be up for that. That's for sure.
Yeah, my back might kill me, but I'd still do it.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I did ask Phil this last week, but it probably is best left on our list here. Is could we see a tennis-style Grand Slam schedule for T20 to build it around the test and the one-day schedule around these major tournaments? Say in Australia as one leg, India as one leg, England as one leg, and America as one leg, or Saudi Arabia or something like that.
The problem is just how much power India have got.
But could they be the ones that drive it?
Maybe, but
if you're going to start the schedule again, let's just wipe the slate clean, and we all know that T20, everything's built around the T20.
Yep.
But could you have that as travelling franchises as part of these Grand Slam events?
Possibly, but also the game in general needs India, Australia, and England to support the other nations.
Yep.
Because if you don't, we'll end up with just those three nations basically, and that's where it's a real worry.
Yep. It's not as free and open as it used to be. That's for sure, mate. All right, mate. The good, the bad, the ugly for this week for you, mate.
I'll just to annoy you, I'll say the Crows beating Carlton.
Bugger you.
Yeah, and as I mentioned Glenelg earlier,
yes.
And that out of that, the uglies obviously the Willie Rioli. I think that's self-explanatory.
Well, my ugly is probably the AFL because of the Willie Rioli. Yes. So yes, I think we're pretty much on the same wavelength there. My good for the week was actually Hawthorn, their 100-year celebration and how they got together and really, got everybody back under the same banner. And I'm sure you've heard it, but the Sam Mitchell speech at the beginning of the game just made you feel like you wanted to run out over the white line again and absolutely go nuts.
It was fantastic. And
my other good for the week, mate, is the Showdown 57. Going to be an absolute cracker, and best of luck to both teams. Mate, we better wrap things up there. As per usual, please like, rate, subscribe to our channel. It definitely helps us when it comes to sponsorship and viewership, and obviously gets us on the map a little bit more than we have. But we've also got to do better than what we've done, and we will do that next week, mate. Thank you for joining us.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at Sportscast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.